everyone, and welcome back to Babywearing and Breastfeeding, the podcast where we talk about everything babywearing and breastfeeding, specifically tailored to medically complex kids. Today, we're going to be talking to Bobbie Reed. She does not have a baby. Her child was actually diagnosed with kidney disease at 22. So she is the parent of a medically complex young adult, and she's got a wealth of information about how you can be an advocate for your child that applies to all of us. So she's going to share her story today. She's going to be sharing how we can really advocate and get involved with helping the policies around our child's care. And I'm really excited to talk to her today and just share this really good information with everybody. So, Bobbie, can you start? Actually, I want you to, believe it or not, start and tell us a little bit about, tell us about yourself. So we were talking earlier before we started rolling about your background and what you went to school for, because I actually think that that really has helped you and probably made an impact and gave you the confidence to get involved in the way that you have. So could you kind of share that with everybody?
Sure. Well, I grew up here in Western Pennsylvania, and I attended Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And when I went there to school, I was in the School of Home Economics. With my major was in family consumer science, and I had a minor there in business and economics. And I actually did my internship at the time with Allegheny County Bureau of Consumer Affairs. And I taught people how to effectively complain and get the results that they were looking for. So it sort of laid the foundation. And after college, I went to work with the phone company, Bell of Pennsylvania. And through their various divestitures, ultimately I worked with AT&T. And I worked with AT&T within their business area in terms of marketing and sales of telecommunications equipment. So I have a lot of extensive training in the background in sales and marketing. And from there, I had two children. I got married, had two children. And the eldest one is my son, Alex, who we're going to be talking about today. And his younger brother is just 14 months different in age. He's younger. And when the kids got older, they didn't like going to the babysitter all the time because my job being an account executive with AT&T was pretty demanding. So therefore, from that point, AT&T paid for me to be educated and licensed in insurance. So I have in Pennsylvania, I hold my state insurance license for life insurance, business, home, and auto insurance. And I went to work in my husband's family insurance agency, George A. Reed Agency, named after my son and my husband, and his father started it in 1960. And I handled their marketing and business management, as well as primarily focused my interest on life insurance sales, how that all worked. And it went very well. And from there, we went on to hopefully have the children grow up and go into the business. Unfortunately, that wasn't our dream come true. My husband is still working in the business, and I still do, with the thankfulness of having access to remote access. I do a lot of work from home and still do dabble with doing that.
So suffice it to say, you are a very good communicator. So for parents that have medically complex children that need to be an advocate, what do you recommend? Like if they do not feel like they're good communicators, if they are very introverted and shy parents, but this is an area where they really need to learn to find their voice and speak up for themselves. Mm-hmm. I mean, you taught people how to essentially complain and find their voice and get their needs met. So what could you say to those parents that might help them?
The thing in dealing with my son's illness with the kidney disease that I find most resourceful was to look into the various organizations that are out there that can provide me resources and help. I did that. I reached out to the different kidney organizations to help educate myself. And through doing that, I made connections and was able to move on further. In terms of communicating, you bring up a very important point. So many people have difficulty asking. For example, my son needs to find a living kidney donor. Again, his kidney transplant that he has failed. And it's very difficult for many people to just step up and come out and actually say what their problem is and ask. So I have a really good resource, and this would be for anybody. I participate with Toastmasters, and it's an organization that teaches you how to become a better speaker and communicator. And believe it or not, Toastmasters has a group called Kidney Stories Toastmasters, where they have people not only from all over the United States, but really from all over the world that tune in there. And you can listen to what they have to say. They offer up resources and other ideas that maybe you or I haven't even thought about. But in addition to that, they give you the ability and ideas to learn how to ask or how to be a better speaker and communicator. And I do have resources for that. You can attend a Toastmasters meeting, Kidney Stories Toastmaster meeting, free of charge, just to see what they're all about and to learn a little bit more about how it works. But just those simple practices that they do can lead you to a better outcome. Other resources that I found was, for example, people that are on dialysis, facing dialysis or issues. There's a virtual support group that you just have to go on your computer. You don't have to leave the comfort of your home, and you can attend their meetings. And they have meetings both for caregivers and for patients.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to add the resources to the notes. What you said that I really like, that I want people to hone in on, is don't be afraid to ask for what you need. Mm-hmm. So
I wrote a marketing plan to find my kid a kidney. And the concept or the basis of that marketing plan is that you only have to ask one time. And what I did is I went to my husband's high school, because they did a quarterly alumni newsletter. And I told them that my son was in a situation where he needed to find his kidney donor. Could they put something in their newsletter that they send out to all their alumni about the need? And they said, yeah. So they took a picture of my son and put in 2 or 3 sentences. And then from there, that one ask, I took that to the next person and said, can you help me out with something like this? We're in a situation, and let them read it. And I made myself a list that I didn't do everything all at once. I staggered it. And anytime anybody did anything, I put it out on social media thanking them. And I adapted to a personal touch where I wrote a thank you note to them, a hand, making them, sound like, thank you so much. You're the greatest thing since sliced bread. What happened was, as I progressed down my list, and I took that not the same example, but like the better, everybody had to outdo the Joneses, like the person before them, and I'm not kidding you on this, Megan, I had the news media calling me and asking me if they could do a story on this, for my son. So you just have to ask once. The National Kidney Foundation took note of this when we did find a living donor for my son. It was a 57-year-old man from New Jersey who we didn't know. And he wanted to give back. He was a Penn State alum, and he wanted to give back to his alumni and to the school. So what he did is he came to Pittsburgh and he got tested. He passed, but he had to lose 30 pounds. So he went back to New Jersey, and he kept seeing these posts that I'd make on social media. The National Kidney Foundation really loved this idea. They flew me to New York, and I filmed the event, filmed my marketing plan for them. And they adopted it. And if you look online and query this, the Big Ask, Big Give, they turned it into that program. And I'm really proud to say that hundreds of people have found kidney donors because of just following those simple steps.
That's amazing. So you only have to ask once.
You only have
Big Ask, Big Give. That's awesome.
Big Ask, Big Give. And if you Google it, it'll come up. And since then, they've updated the program. They got a financial donation to upgrade it, to enhance it even more. And they've even come out with like a mentoring program, peer mentoring and things like that to support people. And I'll bet you, I know that you deal with like a lot of different complex chronic illnesses. Your people need to go back and check with those organizations and ask each of the organizations what resources they might have to offer them. and see how they lead you. And you might find very similar things in that space. So it doesn't just pertain to kidney patients; it's all patients. All people.
Absolutely. And that is really good advice. Everything that you're saying applies. So you only have to ask once. Find the organization that is specialized to your child's condition, because they're going to have resources for you.
Right.
And I have talked a lot too, because nowadays everybody is online and there's lots of groups that are on social media. So get to be a part of these groups, reach out to people. And even if you're having trouble finding your own voice, once you get connected to other people that are in these groups, that is going to give you your stepping stone to move forward. So that is all such good critical advice. Can you kind of tell us now Alex's story? So he was really young when he was diagnosed. He was 22. And so and you were saying earlier, it just progressed so rapidly. And I know a lot of times it's just the biggest shock for parents, like to hear that your child has got something. And sometimes it could be overnight. All of a sudden your life is turned upside down and you're in the ER getting big news.
Exactly. This all started for us. My son attended Penn State University. And while there, he had a double major, business administration and marketing. And he played on the baseball team. He was a pitcher for the baseball team in Altoona. And he graduated on May 5th of 2013. And just 2 weeks after he graduated, he got really, really high blood pressure. He wasn't feeling good. We went to one of those emergency centers, and then they said, you need to go to the hospital right now. We're going to call an ambulance. And I said, oh, it's right over there. I'll take him. So I did. He ended up in the intensive care unit for 10 days. And he nearly died. Anybody else would have been dead because his blood pressure was so high. And they told him at the time that his kidney function was impaired, but because he was so young and he was an athlete, take your medicine, your blood pressure medicine, and we'll follow you, and we're sure you're just going to bounce right back. Well, that was in July. By the time October 10th of 2013 rolled around, he was in end-stage renal failure, complete kidney failure, and he still had the high blood pressure, and he was told that he had to prepare to go on dialysis, and he needed to start looking not for like a deceased donor. They wanted him to have a living donor because they have better lasting longevity from a living donor.
Yeah. For those of you that are listening that don't know, so typically kidney disease is a slow progressing disease. Like, yes. I mean, you could have it for a decade and, you're slowly progressing through kidney disease and your kidneys are slowly failing. So going from July to October is really, really fast, to say the least. Yeah.
That's made it very complex too, getting onto the transplant wait list, because it's rare. This doesn't happen. And they made us go through genetic testing, and not once, but twice. And it's not like on NCIS when they resolved it in 60 minutes. It took 3 months each time to get the answers. And when they found that he didn't have some dreaded disease or autoimmune condition that would attack a new kidney, only then did they approve him to be on the wait list. And that's when I wrote my marketing plan to sell somebody on giving him a kidney.
You wrote that marketing plan during your waiting period? Because I think that for parents that have a medically complex child, and I can absolutely speak from experience, the worst times are the waiting times, when you're waiting for test results, when you're waiting for the next thing, the next procedure, the next surgery. The absolute worst times are the times of uncertainty. How did you get through it?
Well, one of the things is when you have so many things going on, especially with a complex, your child, and it's a complex illness, chronic illness, those things circulated in my brain, and it was driving me crazy. So I started keeping a log. I wrote everything down. I dated it, sort of like, we keep diaries. Well, I made a diary online, and I wrote down anytime a doctor said something to me or told me to do something or told him we had to do this or that, I documented it. And I put it, that was my safe place so that I could get it out of my brain. It wouldn't get lost, but it was there, And still to this day, from 10 years ago, I refer back to that.
Yeah, that's really good advice, because and I will say too that It's very easy to get lost in almost an overwhelming brain haze and brain fog because you're so stressed. But what you just said, for anybody listening that's going through it in real time, writing down everything. So everything that your doctor says, everything that you have questions about, everything that you want to research, that is really going to serve you, because it's hard to take everything in the first time that they say it. So if you're writing it down when you're talking to them or when you're talking to the providers, then you can kind of take it in, process it, go back to it. So that it sounds like even 10 years later, you're still doing that.
I do it. I have another really good tip for your people to follow, and I think it's absolutely essential, especially when you have a little kid and you have other things going on in your life. It's not like the only thing that you want to focus on, that is the only thing, but there's a lot of other things going on. When you prepare, like generally when you have a complex or a chronic illness with a kid, you're going to more than one doctor. It's more than just your primary care doctor. And to keep, one of my biggest challenges is keeping all those doctors on the same page to make sure that they communicate with one another.
Yes.
You know, and
that's huge.
Medication management and being here, there, and everywhere. So early on, I was referred to read a book. It was called The Patient Will See You Now. It's by Eric Topol. And what it's taught me was that you need to make a list before you go to any doctor's appointment. Any appointment, you have a list. And I title my list Concerns for Dr. So-and-so, and I date it when we're going to need it. And I make 2 copies of that list, one for me and one for the doctor. So many times when you go to the doctor, you're trying to remember all these things. You're trying to control your little one, and thinking about 1,000 other things too. But by having it written down, nothing will be missed. Another key thing that solves, a big thing, is rather than the doctor walking in there and telling you what he wants to talk about, because he's going to talk about that anyway, right? You can set the tone for your appointment with the doctor to let him know what's on your mind about your kid. You know what I mean? And you have that list. When you give it to them, this list, you know how like when you go in and they take your blood pressure and your temperature and all that stuff, you give it to the person doing that and say, give this to Dr. So-and-so. This is what I would like to discuss today. You have another copy of it with you, right? I generally take, if you're the patient, then I take somebody with me so that someone else can take the notes or remember things. What I do is I have a pen in my hand and I have my own copy of the list. And as he answers those questions or addresses those concerns, I make notes on it. It's the things that concern him. What I found is sometimes they conveniently skip over things too. So that can hold them accountable, to pull that up. Another means of bettering communications and making sure everybody's on the same page is, I'll bet you people didn't know this, but patient portals, once you type a message to your doctor in the patient portal, it's a permanent record. It can never be deleted. Okay. So in other words, if you told your doctor something in writing and you sent it to him, he can't delete that message out of there. It's a permanent record. And how I found this out was that our family, so many people ask us, well, why don't you donate a kidney to your son? Well, what happened was it was identified that coming from my parents, there's a blood clot factor 2, genetic blood mutation, which it causes you to produce a blood clot. It's a rare level. It's like only factor 2. There's 5 and 7 that are far worse. But anybody who wants to donate a kidney they won't put them at risk. So that ruled out, it came from both my mom and dad. It ruled out the whole side of the family from doing that. Well, what happened was, relating back to my example about that, is I read an after visit summary that your doctor gives you after a visit. And I noticed that when my husband went to the doctors, he coded in there that my husband had this factor 2 genetic mutation. He doesn't.
Yeah.
So I got in touch with the doctor and I said, you need to get this out of there. This is not true. He does not have this. He may have high blood pressure or a weight problem, but he does not have that. And the doctor promptly responded to me, once it's in there, it can't be taken out. The only way that I can do that is make an amendment or another note in there that hopefully somebody will see to identify the fact that he does not have that genetic factor. So that tells you right there that it's a permanent record in your file. And a lot of people don't know that. And another way of making sure that you have stable communications with your doctors is, you know how you have to go a lot of times and have blood drawn and do blood tests and do other testing that one doctor might order.
Mm-hmm.
What I do is when I go in to have that testing done, that result is only going to be driven back to the doctor that orders it. You have to specifically state that you want certain doctors to receive, all the doctors to receive a copy of these results, because what one doctor might be doing might have really detrimental effects on what the other doctor wants you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And this way, if all the doctors have a copy of the information, it's lighting up on their files that they have to look at this, and they'll know that it might be a warning for what they're looking for. You know,
Yes.
especially with children and stuff like that. There's a lot. You have your pediatrician, your primary care doctor, specialist, and they don't all communicate equally. And the portals do not communicate with one another either.
No.
So yeah. I found that myself that I have to be the middleman to make sure everybody's kept together, and that's a really big challenge.
It really is, and that's something that I've addressed and spoken to before, and it's absolutely true, especially if, for example, with whatever condition that your child may have, if one of the specialists happens to be out of network, and then we in network, we did not have a pediatric nephrologist. We had a urologist. So she's in my portal system and can communicate with my child's hematologist, can communicate with my child's regular pediatrician. She cannot, the urologist and the nephrologist cannot communicate, and they're essential.
That's the way it is with us too.
It's ridiculous.
Our nephrologist is not part of the same portal of UPMC. He's off on his own. He has another one, and they don't talk to one another. And then my mom has diabetic-induced kidney disease, and she's 86 years old. And they have their own patient portal. Well, they just recently sold their practice to UPMC. The portals didn't communicate, so all those records have to be manually input. Meantime, her care is suffering because we can't transmit those records or information about her glucose levels and things like that. So it's vitally important that you write things down and you figure out ways to communicate and force the doctors to communicate between one another.
Absolutely.
And those are some of the examples that, I've come up with that I found that really do work.
Yeah, those are really good. So I like the idea of always having, and so nowadays people will keep those questions, list of questions, like in their notes app, like in their phone, but you can always make a copy of that and email it in real time to your doctor, in advance of the visit. So it can be done that way as well. But I think that having a preparation of those questions that you have and things that you need to discuss and taking notes while you're there is really important. And then it's interesting that you say that there may also be something that parents are going to have to find out if they need to give permission for one doctor to share results for the other doctor.
Right.
And we really have to be on top of that stuff because they need to communicate. Right. So being an advocate between doctors is important. Absolutely.
What you do when you go to the doctor, that list that I mentioned earlier, my list of concerns or questions, the very last entry on the bottom is make sure of today's summary visit is sent to the following people. And I list the doctor's name and their fax number or telephone number so that they can share that information. That way they know who it's supposed to go to. And when I go to get the blood work done, I have the doctor's names written down on a piece of paper with the phone numbers that I hand them to the lady there, that she can just go into her computer and go click, 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 and have them all go out to the right people.
So it sounds like you have a template, basically. Like to make it really easy, you have a template that you take to every single appointment. And so that way you can disseminate it between who needs to have it. And it's not like you're reinventing the wheel every time you go. So you've got a template, you're filling in your information, and then you're passing it out. That is really, really good advice.
Yeah. A lot of people don't know this either. We all have iPhones or cell phones. Mm-hmm. Okay. And on our cell phone, I have an iPhone, and it's called the Health app or something on there. My Health or whatever, you can put in there a person's, all their information, their doctors, their conditions, the medications that they take, all that. And when you go in there, they ask you all the time, well, what are your current medications? And you're sitting there trying to remember.
Yeah.
Either you have to take an active list, like you just mentioned, like that, or you can whip out your phone, and I've done this too, and say, here you go, and let them sort through it and write them down.
I
So if
love
they
that.
change and you're at the doctor's office, you can make the change right on your phone and it's current.
Oh, I
Easy.
love that. So absolutely using an app that has all of the
Mhm.
conditions, all of the medications, that's genius.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
on an Android phone, it's called ICE, in case of emergency. And on the iPhone, it's called My Health, or the Health
Okay.
app, and it's a little heart.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great.
And it takes a little bit of time to put it all in because they even ask who your emergency contacts are. And believe it or not, emergency personnel, emergency responders are trained to go to that if you're ever in an accident and unable to communicate, and they can pull all that information up just like that. It's like wearing a medical ID bracelet, but the medical ID bracelet is completely accurate right up to the minute. And
In your
if you're
phone.
interested in learning how to do it, thinking, oh my gosh, I cannot absorb all this, I went on YouTube and I watched a YouTube video a couple times over on how to set it up, and then I just did it in a flash. They have really good YouTube videos on that.
Oh, that's great. Okay. I will add that in the notes. That's a really good tip. Yeah. Can you go back and share what was the initial reaction when you found out that Alex had to have a kidney transplant?
I was in a state of shock. I actually was going to visit a friend of mine in Nashville, Tennessee, and I had landed in the plane, and she picked me up at the airport. And my husband that day was taking Alex to a follow up visit with the nephrology doctor who said, oh, we're going to follow you and you'll bounce back. And my husband called me crying on the phone saying that Alex's kidney had failed and that he needed to find a kidney donor and he needed to get ready to go on dialysis. And it sent me into such a state. I ended up myself in an emergency room.
Oh,
It was like, when I look back, like that was really overwhelming. I just couldn't believe
yeah.
that this was happening to us. And, you sit there and you question, why me? What did I do wrong? And it wasn't anything that I did wrong. Later on, I participated in research with the Society to Improve Diagnosis in Medicine. And what they did is they took Alex's case and they broke it down amongst doctors and physicians and clinicians and medical students. We tore it all apart to find out where misdiagnosis, errors, and omissions were made in his care. And the biggest error or mistake that was made was that doctor, when they discharged us that first time with the high blood pressure, saying, you're an athlete, it'll bounce back, it'll repair itself, take your medicine and go home. They should have, you cannot assume that because
No.
once you lose kidney function, it does not grow back and get better. It can only get progressively worse. You can generally slow it down by your diet and so forth, but we weren't even given any of that counseling because they were just so convinced that it would come back. But that was an error. And you know how you said you deal with like all different chronic illnesses for kids and stuff. If you go to the Society to Improve Medicine, Diagnosis and Medicine website, there is a catalog, like a story catalog of all different disease sects. I represented kidney disease, but there are all different ones like heart disease, pediatrics, different things. You can go on there and see what has befallen other people as well. And what that story bank was set up for was to help doctors in training or other physicians or researchers not to come across or fall upon the same errors because they really do happen out there, like omissions and stuff. But that's another
Yeah.
great resource to have. Yeah.
You actually have said so many things I want to kind of dive into, but first I want to go back through because um, there are going to be families listening with multiple medical complexities, but specifically, let's talk about the children that need transplants. So I imagine it's going to be pretty similar. There's going to be some similarities, even though the organs that children are going to need are going to be different. But walk us through what that was like. So you find out he needs a kidney transplant. What's the next step? The very next step.
Okay. First of all, it's worth noting that adult kidney disease and pediatric kidney disease are two different things. They're
Yes,
managed
they are.
very
Yes.
differently. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And pediatric kidney disease gets really special attention because, once you have chronic kidney disease, even though you may get a transplant or whatever, you always are a kidney disease patient. You always
Yeah.
have, it's not like, oh, you got a transplant, you're healed, move on. it's not like that. So they're handled differently, and there are special pediatric nephrologists and so forth. The surgeons, though, believe it or not, in Pittsburgh anyway, it's the same surgeons that do surgery on adults as they do children. They do, because the anatomy is basically the same, except it's on a much smaller scale. Um, with children, they do dialysis. I don't know that children do dialysis at home. I'm not real familiar with that. My son does home dialysis himself, home hemodialysis. But children, I think, have to probably go into the facility or the hospital to do dialysis. You don't see them in adult dialysis centers and stuff. So they get special
So
attention.
I was always under the impression that if a child needs, and we're not there yet, that's why I don't know all the details, but if a child needs a kidney transplant, that they're actually going to try to do that transplant before they get to the very end stage. So if they know they're going in that direction, because we're actually trying to avoid years in dialysis, because it's just not going to work with the kid.
Right.
So they're trying to get in there sooner.
Right. The anatomy of the child or the age of the child you have to grow a little bit in order to accommodate a kidney, an adult kidney, because there's little space. But and they really do try to do it, the younger the better. In fact, I have a friend who is an adult now, but she started off with pediatric kidney disease, and in her lifetime so far, she's had 4 kidney transplants.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
And they it it would be nice if they lasted your whole life forever, but they really don't. So you have to, I'm finding with this second time around with my son, it's very different. The journey, like the obstacles that you face and stuff like that. And when I talk to her about this regarding like from pediatric to adult and all these different ones, and she said every single one of her transplants was vastly different. And like finding the donor and going through it. So there's different obstacles that come up every time. But the first time through it is the most challenging. And that's why I think that it's so important, reverting back again, to like write things down, because when my son's kidney failed this time around, I could go back and look and see what happened in order to prepare myself mentally to deal with what was going to happen. It's something.
So what are the differences? Is the biggest difference that you are prepared and experienced this time around?
No, not necessarily. For example, this time around, my son, he had blood pressure issues before, but he still does continue to have the blood pressure issues. But this time, he's experienced severe anemia, really bad anemia. Like his blood count has gone so low that there's been teetering on having to do like transfusions. And they try to avoid that because you're mixing in more antibodies into your blood that can cause a problem for finding a matching donor. But, he gives himself his own iron infusions at home, believe it or not, because we do home dialysis and stuff. But to deal with that, recently he had gallstones. One of the conditions of a young person, I guess, with kidney disease is you can have like kidney stones, obviously, and you can also get gallbladder stones, and he had to have surgery to remove his gallbladder. That was just like a couple months ago. So we never experienced that the first time through. Just things of that nature in terms of like mentally and physiologically for the child. He is suffering tremendously from like depression because he knows what dialysis is, having been through it, where the first time around it was a new, okay, well, we'll get through this, that kind of thing, and just deal with it. But having known what already happened and having to go and do this, it's very debilitating and tiring and challenging for him.
And for those that have younger kids, now, like, anybody can experience anxiety and depression, but the signs of it are different based on your child's age. So for those of you listening, that's something I want you to be aware of. So very, very young children. I mean, we may all know that lots of times things are tummy troubles. Like if your kid is very, very anxious, they're having stomach aches every day, or if they're truly, I know in our experience, like, we got to a point where if we would drive by or to a big building, like let's say we went to Home Depot and it's a big building, my little toddler would freak out because he thought we were at the hospital again. He would have a complete meltdown in his car seat because he thought mommy had brought him back to the doctor's. So just little things like you may not even know to expect pop up. And that's their way of basically like, I'm really working through this mentally. And so it's going to be different with little kids than it is an adult. But so absolutely every time that you are having to go through this again, that it's going to be harder emotionally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think too, being active and being involved in different activities and things like that. I know that my son, he was an umpire for youth sports while he was
Mm-hmm.
on dialysis the first time through. Whereas little kids, like they might want to play Little League Baseball, but they really can't. But believe it
Yeah.
or not, they have, if you go out there and you simply have to ask, they have like fields of dreams for like little kids and accommodate kids with challenges and stuff like that, that they can become active participants and have friends and go out and have events rather than being secluded or eliminated. And I think that
Yeah.
socialization is really, really important for mentally, like for mental is a big part of like physical illness. That, you know, if you're in a good place mentally, the physical part, you can overcome that a little better. And right
Yeah.
now, I don't know that we are, you know, but
Yeah.
we're trying. You have to work at it. So I think that that would hold true to also for kids. Yes.
Absolutely. That's really good advice. So, I think a lot of us are now well aware that you cannot separate mind and body. If you're not in a good place mentally, then physically that can literally just cause you to tank even further. Whereas if you're coping really well, then, it's going to help you for sure. And I think
Well,
it's normal to expect people to have highs and lows.
one of the things you should tell your people to check into is using the services that you get for free from your social worker. Okay. Um, they have resources that you and I may not be aware of. Like maybe there might be state programs, or maybe it might be a way to cut through the red tape because you're dealing with so much insurance, Medicare, coverages, this, that, and the other. But utilize a social worker wherever you possibly can and have a list like you do for them for the doctors. You know, you
Yeah.
take a list there and say, well, what can we do to get him involved in doing this or that? Or what do you suggest? For example, the dietitian and diet is so important. I use the American Association of Kidney Patients. They have excellent dietary resources for patients, and they tell you different stages of your kidney progress of what would be most appropriate or what recipes are good to eat, because don't have to, you have to abide by the kidney diet, but you don't have to have it be bland and be
Mm-hmm.
disappointed all the time. And little kids, if you say you can't have that ice cream cone or you can't have that
Right.
snack because you know it goes and everybody else is sitting there eating ice cream. You
Yeah.
know, they actually do. There are places within the United States that make kidney friendly kid treats, you know, that you can do for a birthday or something like that to make it special, that they're not different, that they're part of the group. And I think
Yeah.
that those kind of things are psychologically important for kids.
Absolutely. That's such good advice. And that's a huge help, I think, for kids to feel involved. And I think what has helped too is that now we are so used to dietary restrictions for allergies that so many places are becoming much more aware and sympathetic to that. And so you're going to have a lot more availability. Even actually, I just see at our local grocery stores, you've got a lot more options. So that's something to think about. So being aware of, dietary restrictions and making sure that you're planning ahead and what can you do to include your
Mm-hmm.
child. So you went through a very traumatic diagnosis very quickly with Alex. And you were able to go in that waiting period and create this marketing plan that was so good that it's getting, recognized by the National Kidney Association. And now you are an advocate and you are helping other parents. And you were recently on Capitol Hill. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It seems like I'm in Capitol Hill every other month for different organizations advocating. One of the really important things these days is having to take the anti-rejection drugs and monitoring your kidney function. And there is a test that recently came out, not recently, within the past 5 or 6 years, it was approved by the FDA, that can detect early rejection of organs, not only just kidneys, but we're talking hearts, livers, all organs.
How
Okay.
early?
way, way, way in advance. The point is, what they do is they take what they call like a baseline blood test, and they see all your criteria where you are today, like as soon as you get your transplant. And then periodically, generally like the first year or so after, they do the more frequently this test, and they run and they compare versus where it was when you first got your transplant to where it is today. And they can detect the earliest signs of rejection for any organ transplant. And
Wow.
in doing so, they can address it and deal with it to either slow
Right.
it down or stop it dead in its tracks to get it out of there. The What happened was, the reason I was on Capitol Hill was the fact that Medicare decided to not pay for that test anymore at the recommendation of one of the contractors, that they had to kind of cut expenses. And what a lot of people probably don't realize is that when Medicare does something, other insurers tend to follow suit.
Hmm.
Okay. So that would mean like, oh, we don't have to worry about that. We don't have Medicare. We have XYZ insurance. Well, XYZ insurance sees what Medicare did and got away with it, so they're not going to pay for it either. And by eliminating that, the only thing that's left is to go in and do an invasive kidney biopsy. Or in your case, if you have a heart problem with a child, to do a heart biopsy to see what's actually going on with the organ. It's invasive. It can be
Right.
life-threatening. It's incapacitating in that you have to disrupt your life. Uh, it's just
And the
very
kids aren't
difficult.
going through enough already that now we
Is it
have to do this when there used to be a very simple solution.
right now? The test is pretty expensive to have run when they do this blood test. It's like $3,000 that they have to pay because there's only one
Mm.
lab in the entire country. Even though there are multiple
Wow.
people that provide this test, there's one
Yeah.
lab that processes all the results.
So if you're paying out of pocket, it's $3,000, but
Right? Yeah.
Medicaid used to cover it.
Medicare, beginning in
Medicaid, sorry,
January,
Medicare.
they're not going to pay. They decided they're not going to pay for it anymore. So what happens is, people, the only thing that are left to them is that biopsy. And to do a kidney biopsy, you have to show signs of rejection or show a reason for needing that test, right?
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two is it's really expensive. It costs
Yeah.
over $14,000 to do a
Ooh.
biopsy. Okay, 14,000 versus like three, and if you can catch it early and change a medication or something and not have to worry about a biopsy ever,
Right.
that's a really good thing.
Right.
And my son, whenever he got his first transplant, this test came out after he had his transplant by about a year. So he missed the baseline, and they can't start
Mm.
mid-track. So he did not have the ability to do that. Instead, he had to wait till he was showing signs of rejection, got the biopsy, had to realized that there was a problem, had to go through plasmapheresis treatments to cleanse his body of donor-specific antibodies. Then after they did that, they did another biopsy and determined that he had lost 30% function of his kidney transplant. And they said it could be 4 months, it could be 4 years, but you need to start looking for another donor and get on the wait list again. And that's
Mm.
what happened to us last year. And that happened after COVID, because he had pneumonia really bad during COVID. Yeah.
Mm.
And, so just things like that. And I developed a relationship too with my local legislators. The Living Donor Protection Act legislation is really important to people. For people, everybody should be aware of that, because not only can you get a donor kidney, you can get a donor liver, donor corneas. You can donate other parts of your body while you're still living and not be affected by it. You can live fine with just
Mhm.
one kidney. You can live fine with just your liver regrows once they take part of it and give it to somebody else to save their life. But the thing is, in doing that you have to have like living donor protection so that the person donating can be compensated in some way for missing work, or not losing their job and things like that, because they're not really protected under FMLA like you are when you have a baby, that kind of thing.
Mm.
So this legislation is pending on a national level, and we always ask about that when we call upon our legislators to please put a word in and put this through so that other people can be helped with these protections so that they can get insurance or keep a job. They're real important. But in the state of Pennsylvania, I befriended my local state legislators, And our senator here actually went on the Senate floor in Pennsylvania a couple years ago and told our story about Alex graduating from college. His teammates on the baseball team wanted to give him a kidney, but couldn't. Think about it. They had bills to pay, families to start, had to be guaranteed insurance, couldn't afford to lose a job, that kind of thing. So they were unable to donate a kidney to him. So she told that story on the state Senate floor in Pennsylvania. And as soon as she told the story, they all voted and they passed a living donor protection legislation in Pennsylvania. And right now I'm working with her to amend that legislation because somebody crossed out lines on there that gave protections to people that if they needed to take a little extra time off other than just 6 months, that they could do that without losing their job or to get paid, that kind of thing, or tax credits for donating an organ, to give you a little bit of remuneration that way for your taxes or something. So she's going to introduce those particular pieces of legislation in Pennsylvania to amend that bill that law that's already in place here in Pennsylvania. But
do you know how many states that this law is active in, the Living Donor Protection Act?
Yeah, there's like over 20 some states in the United States already that have this legislation, but each state has their own, they drew up their own plan, kind of thing.
Sure.
They're not all uniform, whereas the one that's sitting in like the House of Representatives and the Senate in Washington, D.C. at the federal level, it's all the same. It would be the same for the entire country, making it more uniform and just for everybody. But
so it's sitting at DC on a federal level. So do you know when they're going to vote on that?
No, we keep asking them to, get it out of committee and let's move this along.
Yeah.
But for some unknown reason, it's been this way even before I became an advocate because of this, because I knew that if Alex's kidney ever failed the first time around, that something else had to be there for him other than just doing dialysis, or having to go find another kidney donor. And I'm a big proponent of research and so forth, as well as donor protections. And that legislation was there over 10 years ago, and it's still, we're making headway, but it's still not.
It was there 10 years ago when you started this process, and it is still sitting there now?
Every Congress, they reintroduce legislation when there's a new Congress and try to get it put through. And there's hundreds of people, like legislators, that are already signed on and committed to it. But for some reason, it's not been pulled out and voted on. It's like stuck in this committee or that committee. So
for those of you listening, call and bother your congressman or woman and say, we want to get this on the floor, because it's not just for, children or people with kidney disease. This is for any type of donor protection. So if you've got liver transplants, whatever your child potentially needs, like this protects their donors. So in Pennsylvania, you said they get up to 6 months. So if a donor needs up to 6 months of assistance, that's what they provide.
Not necessarily assistance, but they're guaranteed that they'll have their job back.
They'll have their job. It's job protection for 6 months, which is really crucial. So can I ask, obviously, it probably is a little bit different.
In Pennsylvania, you can't be a resident of like another state and come to
Pennsylvania. Okay, that makes sense. Right.
That's
you have to be a resident.
There are several states that already have this on the books, because your listeners are from all over. And the American Kidney Fund has a grade sheet for each individual state of what their grade is on the living donor protection legislation they have, and they tell you what it has. So that might be like a resource that they'd want to look into and find out what the grade is for their particular state and where their state stands. And there's more signing on every day with their own legislation and that kind of thing. Job protections so that you can get insurance, protections so that they can't discriminate against you or give you rated policies for your life insurance because you gave a kidney, or because you gave an organ. Because organ donors have to be healthier people than you or I. They have to be like top-notch health in order to be able to donate. I told you about the slightest risk for a blood clot factor.
Right. And then that rules you out. Exactly.
Rules you out. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So they test you thoroughly. If anybody wants to donate any organ, they have to go through the same testing that the recipient goes through.
Yeah.
To make sure that they're perfectly healthy. And
can you tell us a little bit more about the testing? What's involved?
Well, I would imagine, for each organ, they have their own set of protocols. Right. But generally, it's like a complete overall. Like they do cardiac stress tests. They do obviously 27 tubes of blood were drawn out of him one day that we went for evaluation. They do that. They do ultrasounds. They do genetic testing, to make sure that you don't have some ill-fated genetic factor in your system or other disease, to rule out everything else that could be wrong. A perfect example of this would be my sister-in-law on my husband's side of the family. She works in medicine. She's an ultrasound technician. And she knew that she would be a match for my son. And she said, we're going to solve this and nip this in the bud right away. She went through all the testing. She was like so convinced that she was giving him an organ. She told us, usually it's very private. They don't tell you anything that's going on. She opted to tell us that she was doing this and giving him a kidney. Went in for her final approval, and the doctors walked into the room and said, you have to go see a nephrologist. Your kidneys are barely supporting you because as a child, your kidneys never grew. And they're like little kidneys in a big person. And you need to be followed by a nephrologist. And it ruled her out from giving a kidney because they said if you gave him a kidney, you wouldn't live, and neither would he, because of that.
Wow.
But and that's so true. So many people have illnesses that they're totally unaware of. And when they go through this testing, it uncovers or identifies things that they would have never dreamed that were wrong. It picks up like early detection, and they find out. Like, I think that there's hundreds of thousands of people walking around with kidney disease, and 80% of them don't know that they have it at some point, at some stage. Yeah, because it's like before it's too late, and when it starts showing its symptoms or its ire, it's too late. The damage is already done. But, they're very thorough with the testing, and you need to be in like really good health. You can't be a diabetic.
How long does the testing typically last? So you're going through all different, blood tests, ultrasounds.
Right. Well, generally first of all, there is no cost to the donor for testing. Any organ donor transplant, like any organ that you're talking about, the charges for that fall upon my son's health insurance or medical insurance. You pay nothing. That's the first thing. The second thing is you generally, in our case, you would go online and fill out an online form to the transplant center of what, like your basic medical information, height, weight, things like that. And they screen those first, like through the first screening. Like if they see that you're way overweight or you take so much blood pressure medicine or you're diabetic or whatever, it would rule you out. They screen things that way. And then once you clear that hurdle, then you go in and you meet with the transplant center directly. And when you meet with the transplant center, they have people meet with you who are like a psychologist or psychiatrist. They have doctors meet with you to discuss the procedure and what you can anticipate the healing time. They have dietitians meet with you to talk about health, kidney health and, taking care of yourself after the fact. And just go over everything. And then they give you the list of things that you have to complete in order to have all of your testing done to see if you are qualified. And once you pass all this testing, they sit down and they have a board meeting amongst all these people who set up these requirements. And they all take a vote whether you're going to be qualified or not to be a donor. And if one person disagrees or another road bump hits in there, you have to go back and rectify that. They don't allow you to do that.
This sounds like this process could take months.
Yeah, it generally does. It's not like an overnight thing. Like, I know that my son has possibly a potential donor coming in the next week or two. And next week, my understanding is this person, we don't know who it is going to come into Pittsburgh for 3 days and go through all the testing and evaluation. And it's like they're coming to Pittsburgh on their own. They have to pay their own expenses for that. But if you have the money, there are resources through the various organizations that they can get compensated for if they're interested in donating an organ, to be funded to do that. And a lot of people are aware of that too.
Wow. So this person, and in my mind, I also think about what that must be like emotionally for your family, because you can get all the way to the end and you are going to hear something in a few days. And that anticipation has got to be really, really difficult to kind of navigate. How does that affect y'all's family dynamics? How do you process that?
Well, it's just, there are just so many things entering into it. It's like an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
And the way that I escape that from being like a hound on my son, like pounding him all the time,
Mm-hmm.
is I go out there and I do advocacy stuff. I do tabling events and talk to my local government officials and go to these organizations and learn what's new on the horizon. And I make suggestions on how they could better improve outcomes and things like that. So as to take the focus, not necessarily off of my son, but like the pressure the
Yeah.
system to learn more, that I can help him, but also help other people. That's
Yeah,
what's
that is
really important.
absolutely beautiful and amazing that you are taking your own feelings and tension and anxiety and you're proactively doing something about it. So I think we can all learn from that, because we're not, I mean, it doesn't do anybody any good for us to sit here and stress and brain fog, and to just not, to just kind of wait for things to happen. Like, proactively go out there and put all of that into doing something positive. That's a really beautiful
And
message.
like when I first became involved, the reason why I did this is because the 57-year-old man who we did not know gave my kid a kidney and saved his life. He gave him 7 more years of life without having to be on dialysis. So I made that commitment. You can't pay somebody to do that. It's illegal, and it's my way of every day saying thank you to him. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think of him and thank him for doing that. One way that I did learn how to be a better advocate and how to engage better with people was to attend a conference. The American Association of Kidney Patients, as well as the National Kidney Foundation and the American Kidney Fund, all have like an annual meeting, so to speak, where you can go and see resources and talk to other people in the same situation. I remember the year that the American Association of Kidney Patients had it, they had it in Nashville. 2 years in a row, they had it in Nashville, Tennessee, and I had a roommate from college that lived there, so I went there and I got to go to the conference actually for free. It didn't cost anything to go, and I learned so much. And then at a following conference where they're based out of in Tampa, Florida, I actually went and spoke down there on the ups and downs of being a caregiver. They had their
Yeah.
conference in Tampa one year, but with COVID, they stopped having them in person, but they have since brought them back, and they're just now starting to have the conferences in person. But I think that whatever chronic illness that you're dealing with, there has to be resources along that line to find out where these people might be meeting up or where you could gain more information. We didn't talk anything about pediatric research either, and I participate with PCORI, Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, and they fund research for comparative research. Like, let's compare this to see what works better. And when I was at a recent conference, the PCORI annual meeting in Washington, D.C., about a month or two ago, believe it or not, I went through all the poster exhibits they have of different ongoing research. And the only ones that I saw there related to pediatric kidney disease. There were 2 research projects ongoing that you could actually be part of, if you were interested in doing that. And they had people there discussing their research and what they expected their outcomes to be. So you can check their research, their website, to find out what research is being done in the pediatric community, not necessarily only in kidney disease, but in any disease, and get resources that way to maybe get your child or yourself involved on something that would be cutting edge that might really, really benefit you.
Okay, so specifically, if I wanted to do that and I'm going online to look for that, what am I typing in the search field? Like, for those of you listening, really break it down. Am I looking for, am I just going in, typing in pediatric medical research on kidney disease? So you could specify that to your child's
Yeah,
medical
you can. What
complexity,
I
and then
do,
you can start reaching
I
out that way.
go into the PCORI website. It's Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, PCORI, PCORI. And once you get
PCORI.
to
Okay, everybody. PCORI, PCORI.
yeah, right. And once you get to their main page, you look, they have like an index, like for searching, search, and you could type
Mm-hmm.
in pediatric research heart disease. or cancer or whatever. And it would bring up they have like an encyclopedia of all previous research that has been done, approved drugs, things that have gone on, and how long that research ran and when it did, but also ongoing to find out where it's at, where you can make inquiries. And that's for all
So if you
types.
find something that, let's say they're testing a new treatment on whatever condition it is that your child has, and it looks really promising and you want your child to be part of it, is that this a site that you can go through and search in this index, find that research being done, and potentially get involved in it?
Definitely. They give you the contact information of who to call up and find out
That's
about it.
amazing.
And so many people don't know about it. There's other research that goes
Yeah,
on.
no, I didn't know about it. And I'm so glad that you are bringing it up so everybody listening can learn about it.
And they're based right out of PCORI is based out of Washington, D.C., and they are funded through the National Institutes of Health. And about a year or two ago, I worked on a committee to have petition Congress to refund them for the next 10 years. So they have research funding for 10 years. It's not like you're going to sign up and they're going to go away next month. They're on the books for the next 10 years, and there's all their information is cataloged, reviewed, and so forth. Another thing that you can sign up to do, if your people are interested in it, is to become an ambassador like I am. And once you're an ambassador, you can become a reviewer. Like if somebody is thinking about doing research and they part of the big requirements now with PCORI is underserved communities, minorities, rural communities, to incorporate the patient perspective. You can't have just all these doctors going about doing it. They want to get the opinions of the normal everyday person, the patient, and they will not approve research unless they have the patient component in it. Okay, you have to have, it has to be built in there. So you can actually not only become part of the research, but you can also become like a reviewer to say, well, gee, they didn't talk about this, or, I don't think we should fund this unless they put that in there, and,
So when you say reviewer, you mean you could be part of the research study, but you could also become an ambassador, aka a reviewer for the study to make sure that everything is being covered.
Right. An ambassador is one thing, like where you talk about what PCORI does, but they have within that component to be reviewers of different research submit. Like I have an idea, I want to do research, so I'm going to submit this in there. And so they send it out to all the people reviewing, like obviously if it's about pediatrics, they'd want to send it to somebody familiar with pediatrics, not older age people, and have them read it over to see what they think about this research, the way that they're going about it. Or maybe they forgot to incorporate something in there, or you can incorporate your patient's perspective in your idea. Or you could tell them, you want people to sign off and do this research. Darn it, put it in English that they understand it. You can't have all these medical terms and this, that, and the other. You need to spell out exactly what it is, because we're not all doctors. And,
so you do not have to be a medical professional. To be a reviewer, do you have to be, let's look at the scope of pediatrics. To be a reviewer for one of these studies, do you have to be like the parent of a child with a condition, or could you be a relative? Could you be a grandparent? Could you be an aunt?
I don't know. That would be a question that you would ask the PCORI people.
Okay.
I'm not a patient. My son is the patient, but I am like the voice of the patient, for them. And they have asked me to be a reviewer on different things. It's sort of like if you're sitting at home and you have time on your hands to look something over, or to be involved to find out what's coming up or what might be there, or be able to contribute to what's going to come up. This is an excellent way to be involved, and it just happens to be one of the organizations that, I participate with, and I think that there's a lot of value in what they do. And I was really surprised, like I said, when I went to that conference and saw just pediatric research there for that. I said, well, where's the adult research? Because my son's not eligible for this. I'd like to know what's the status of the artificial implantable kidney, or transplanting pig kidneys or pig organs into people. You know what I mean? What's going on with that? Why aren't we comparing these things? Where is it? And they haven't, they didn't have anything there. So whenever I wrote a review from being at the conference, I said, the next conference that you have, maybe you might want to consider incorporating this into there. You know what I mean? Like critiquing them, saying, I think it's all well and good that you have the pediatric aspect there, but you need to include the adult or the young adult edge in there as well to let us all know what's going on with that, because people don't know to go and look it up on your index to see what you're doing or what you're not doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And okay. So I fully am getting an idea of the reviewer. Can you kind of go back and explain a little bit what the ambassador might do? So this would be like an ambassador. Again, we're talking about for PCORI. And so what would their role be and how could you get involved that way?
I'm an ambassador for the National Kidney Foundation, the
Okay.
American Kidney Fund, the American Association of Kidney Patients, and PCORI. And
you covered all the bases. That's amazing.
I covered all the bases, right. And what I do is, like, when there's like I call it a tabling event, like a senior health fair, or the Chamber of Commerce does something, I'll go and I'll set a table up with information about these organizations and groups and the resources that they have. And those groups, they send me the information to educate me on what's going on and what's available and what they're keying in on. Not only that, as an ambassador, I find out when they're offering like Zoom calls, like you have your podcast every week or so when you do your podcast. They have different Zoom calls that pertain to specific topics from time to time. There might be pediatrics, kidney disease.
Yeah.
They might have they just had a recent one. Remember, I told you I went to DC about the blood testing to advocate that Congress do something about this to continue to fund this, that sort of thing. They have professional speakers come on and talk about those things, that you can make yourself more knowledgeable without even leaving the comfort of your home. And then when you talk to other people to help them, you can share, well, I found this out, or, I found this out this way. Why don't you try to do it this way? It might work. And that's what an ambassador does. And I know for a fact that the National Kidney Foundation is really, really looking hard to try and find an ambassador in every congressional legislative district in the country. And the reason why they want to do that is that living donor protection legislation, to get every single legislator on board for that, so that there's no wiggle room, that they have to put it through, that they have a voice in the front line asking about this. So there is opportunity there. It doesn't cost anything to be an ambassador. And generally when they have their events, in fact, when they do, they pay for, if you wanted to go, they'll pay for your transportation to get there. They pay for your housing. They pay for your meals. They educate you on what they would like you to discuss with your legislators and how to do it. Things like
so they have somebody holding your hand, walking you through step by step. This is what we need to do to make this happen.
For a morning or afternoon of training. And then the next day you might go to the Hill in small groups. You're not venturing off.
And so you're not by yourself. Right.
Yeah. You're never by yourself, and you have somebody there to guide you. And what carries the biggest the biggest impact, and people don't realize this, if you're in your congressional office or your state legislator's office and you tell them your personal story, like I told you my story about Alex and needing a donor and how the kids couldn't donate to him, that kind of thing, because they had expenses. That's a personal story from a constituent. And being a constituent, I vote for that person. And if enough constituents raise concerns to a particular issue, then it turns on a light bulb in their head saying, well, maybe I better pay attention to this because these people are voting for me and they won't vote for me if I don't take action on this. So that's that's how you advocate and be an ambassador and a spokesperson for them.
Absolutely. Got it. So good. All of this. So you can be an ambassador. That's such and you're learning more, and you're giving a sense of hope to those that are coming after you. That's really great.
That Toastmasters too, that we talked about early on. It's very, very helpful to find resources, connections in the community, and actually how to tell your story, or how to be, rather than saying, oh gosh, I got to talk about myself. You yourself know your story better than anybody else, but a lot of times your mind will jump all around and everything.
Yeah.
You get nervous and you don't know what to say. They will help train you to how to do it in, they call it the elevator speech, 90 seconds, in the elevator, how to tell your story to capture their interest like that. just things like that that are very helpful to draw upon those different resources to make it a better path for you.
Yeah. God, this has been so, so good. And literally everything that you had to say, there was a golden nugget in there. So I can't end this without asking for one last piece of advice, one last message that you would give to, parents that are just going through this now, who might have younger children. So, pediatrics, medical complexities. What would you tell them if they want to follow in your footsteps, and instead of, losing themselves in the stress of all of the tests and the procedures and the waiting, if they want to feel empowered, if they want to do something, what is the first thing that they do to start? And what is the big message that you want them to have, the overall takeaway?
I think that the big message is you can't do this alone. If you try to do it, you're going to fall down. Okay. So, you have resources in social media, but maybe social media might not be the most reliable. But there are groups there that you can throw it out there or get ideas that you can take with you back to your doctor to get the truth of the matter. And one of the questions that you might want to ask whenever you contact your organization, are there local support groups that I can go to get my questions answered right in my own backyard? And for example, I know the American Association of Kidney Patients recently contacted me, giving me a list of all the local support groups in your area and what their criteria are and what they do. And they have a dictionary or a lineup that you can say, my zip code's this, and they'll look it up and tell you where the different resources are. The Virtual Dialysis Support Center, they meet twice a month. The Kidney Solutions people, they meet every Monday night, or even listen to a podcast like you do. Is very helpful, because I'm sure every time you have your podcast, you talk about a different subject matter or different thing. That can all be brought to life, and anything that you learn on there, you can go back out then again and share it on social media to spread the news, furthering your cause for you personally there, but also maybe benefiting and helping other people.
Absolutely. So you guys listening, don't do this alone. Don't try to do it alone. There are so many resources out there that all you have to do is one big ask. Thank you so much, Bobbie. I appreciate it. This has been just fantastic. For you guys listening, every Tuesday morning, we will be dropping a new episode. So please join us. You can listen on Spotify, Amazon Music, and if you need to see our smiling faces, YouTube. All right, everybody, enjoy your week. Thank you all for joining us on today's episode of Babywearing and Breastfeeding, Nurturing Miracles. I hope you found our discussion enlightening and that you leave feeling supported and empowered. Remember, you are not alone on this journey. Tune in next week for more insights and conversations that connect us all in the shared experience of parenting. Until then, take care and cherish every miracle with your little ones.